go.
Alright, I'm Seamus Leach, Tanner Sherman, and we did ours on chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. So, what is a concussion? Concussion, also known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy, is a severe injury to the cranium or when the brain makes any type of contact with the skull. Alright, there are many side effects to a concussion such as dizziness, headaches, ringing of ears, and memory loss.
What to do if you receive a concussion? Treatment for a concussion will depend on the severity of the concussion. Some people like to rest for about a week or two before they actually go into like any physical activity or like mental activity, and then also go to your nearby doctor to receive help.
Alright, so more side effects and symptoms: vomiting, slurred speech, delayed response, dazed and confused like the song, fatigue, ringing in the ears, temporary loss of consciousness, and amnesia surrounding the traumatic event. Alright, so in what sports are concussions most popular? Here's a chart of those sports. So you see football. This is per 1,000, I think. Oh no, 10,000. So I put an extra zero on that. So there's 64 to 77 for football. Men's ice hockey, there's 54. Girls soccer, 33. Men's lacrosse, 40 to 47. Women's lacrosse, 31 to 35, and men's soccer, 19.
Seamus, I thought I read once where cheerleading actually has a pretty high accident rate.
Oh, that was for sports.
Well, I'm pretty sure cheerleading is a part of sports.
Alright, here's a famous athlete that has like severe CTE. He also killed himself because it was so bad. Junior Seau, he played 20 seasons in the NFL as a middle linebacker. He sustained more than 1,500 blows to the head. He was also diagnosed with CTE after he was found dead in his house. He committed suicide at age 43, and research determined he developed major brain disease from CTE.
Can I interrupt you again? That's common. That's common that there's a suicide rate with those who've had a lot of concussions. I know there was a player from the Pittsburgh Steelers who committed suicide. I don't think he's on your, Mike Webster committed suicide.
Alright, these are more famous athletes that have suffered from CTE. You see right here, Muhammad Ali, Brett Favre, Ali Masson, Bernie Kosar, Sugar Ray Robinson, Chris Henry, Mike Webster, Junior Seau, Chris Benoit, and Jalon Belcher.
Those last two, I'm not familiar with.
Chris Benoit is actually a WWE wrestler.
Okay.
He got hit in the head a lot. He went insane and killed himself and his whole family.
Okay.
Here's our video. Yeah,
How long does your video last?
10 minutes and 55 seconds.
Let's suppose that you're writing a
Kind
really
of long.
important
Hold on,
email to
there's
a
an ad.
colleague.
Play.
The word concussion evokes a fear these days more so than it ever has. And I know this personally. I played 10 years of football, was struck in the head thousands of times. And I have to tell you though, what was much worse than that was a pair of bike accidents I had where I suffered concussions, and I'm still dealing with the effects of the most recent one today as I stand in front of you. There is a fear around concussion that does have some evidence behind it. There is information that a repeated history of concussion can lead to early dementia such as Alzheimer's and chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That was the subject of the Will Smith movie, Concussion. And so everybody is caught up in football and what they see in the military, but you may not know that bike riding is the leading cause of concussion for kids, sports-related concussion, that is. And so Another thing that I should tell you that you may not know is that the helmets that are worn in bicycling and football and many activities, they're not designed or tested for how well they can protect your children against concussion. And they're in fact designed and tested for their ability to protect against skull fracture. And so I get this question all the time from parents, and they ask me, would you let your own child play football, or should I let my child play soccer? And I think that as a field, we're a long way from giving an answer with any kind of confidence there. So I look at that question from a bit of a different lens, and I want to know, how can we prevent concussion? Is that even possible? And most experts think that it's not. But the work that we're doing in my lab is starting to reveal more of the details around concussion so that we can have a better understanding. The reason we're able to prevent skull fracture with helmets is because it's pretty simple, we know how it works. Concussion's been much more of a mystery. So to give you a sense of what might be happening in concussion, I want to show you the video here that you see when you type into Google, what is a concussion? The CDC website comes up, and this video essentially tells the whole story. What you see is the head moves forward, the brain lags behind, then the brain catches up and smashes into the skull. It rebounds off the skull and then proceeds to run into the other side of the skull. And what you'll notice is highlighted in this video from the CDC, which I'll note was funded by the NFL, is that the outer surfaces of the brain, where it was to have smashed into the skull, looks like it's been damaged or injured. So it's on the outer surface of the brain. And what I'd like to do with this video is to tell you that there are some aspects that are probably right, indicative of what the scientists think happens in concussion, but there's probably more that's wrong with this video. So one thing I do agree with, and I think most experts would, is that the brain does have this dynamics. It does lag behind the skull and then catch up and move back and forth and oscillate. That we think is true. However, the amount of motion you see in the brain in this video is probably not right at all. There's very little room in the cranial vault, only a few millimeters, and it's filled entirely with cerebral spinal fluid, which acts as a protective layer. And so the brain as a whole probably moves very little inside the skull. The other problem with this video is that the brain is shown as a kind of rigid whole as it moves around, and that's not true either. Your brain is one of the softest substances in your body, and you can think of it kind of like jello. So as your head is moving back and forth, your brain is twisting and turning and contorting, and the tissue is getting stretched. And so most experts, I think, would agree that concussion is not likely to be something that's happening on this outer surface of the brain, but rather it's something that's much deeper towards the center of the brain. Now, the way that we're approaching this problem to try to understand the mechanism of concussion and to figure out if we can prevent it is we are using a device like this. It's a mouth guard. It has sensors in it that are essentially the same that are in your cell phone, accelerometers, gyroscopes, and when someone is struck in the head, it can tell you how their head moved at 1,000 samples per second. The principle behind the mouth guard is this. It fits onto your teeth. Your teeth are one of the hardest substances in your body, so it rigidly couples to your skull and gives you the most precise possible measurement of how the skull moves. People have tried other approaches with helmets. We've looked at other sensors that go on your skin, and they all simply move around too much. And so we found that this is the only reliable way to take a good measurement. So now that we've got this device, we can go beyond studying cadavers, because you can only learn so much about concussion from studying a cadaver. And we want to learn and study live humans. So where can we find a group of willing volunteers to go out and smash their heads into each other on a regular basis and take concussion? Well, I was one of them. And it's your local friendly Stanford football team. So this is our laboratory. And I want to show you the first concussion that we measured with this device. One of the things that I should point out is the device has this gyroscope in it, and that allows you to measure the rotation of the head. Most experts think that that's the critical factor that might start to tell us what is happening in concussion. So please watch this video.
Overs bring extra people late, but Luck has time.
Ooh.
Mason is crushed.
Is that Stanford?
Yeah, Stanford is down below.
Thompson screen will soon come on. Just this little close up. It's separation. See?
Who's the other team?
Uh,
Is that Washington State?
Yeah. You'll hear this.
Sorry, 3 times is probably a little excessive there, but you get the idea. So when you look at just the film here, pretty much the only thing you can see is he got hit really hard and he was hurt. But when we extract the data out of the mouth guard that he was wearing, we can see much more detail or much richer information. And one of the things that we noticed here is that he was struck in the lower left side of his face mask. And so that did something. First, it was a little counterintuitive. His head did not move to the right. In fact, it rotated first to the left. Then as the neck began to compress, the force of the blow caused it to whip back to the right. So this left-right motion was sort of a whiplash type phenomenon, and then we think that is probably what led to the brain injury. Now this device is only limited in such that it can measure the skull motion, but what we really want to know is what's happening inside of the brain. So we collaborate with Svein Kleiven's group in Sweden. They've developed a finite element model of brain. And so this is a simulation using the data from our mouth guard from the injury I just showed you. And what you see is the brain. This is a cross section right in the front of the brain twisting and contorting, as I mentioned. So you can see this doesn't look a lot like the CDC video. Now the colors that you're looking at are how much the brain tissue is being stretched. And so the red is 50%. That means the brain has been stretched to 50% its original length, the tissue in that particular area. And the main thing I want to draw your attention to is this red spot. So the red spot is very close to the center of the brain, and relatively speaking, you don't see a lot of colors like that on the exterior surface as the CDC video showed. Now to explain a little more detail about how we think concussion it might be happening, one thing I should mention is that we and others have observed that a concussion is more likely when you're struck and your head rotates in this direction. This is more common in sports like football, but this seems to be more dangerous. So what might be happening there? Well, one thing that you'll notice in the human brain that is different than other animals is we have these 2 very large lobes. We have the right brain and the left brain. And the key thing to notice in this figure here is that right down the center of the right brain and the left brain, there's a large fissure that goes deep into the brain. And in that fissure, which you can't see in this image, you'll have to trust me, there is a fiber sheet of tissue. It's called the falx. And it runs from the front of your head all the way to the back of your head. And it's quite stiff. And so what that allows for is when you're struck and your head rotates in this left-right direction, forces can rapidly transmit right down to the center of your brain. Now what's there at the bottom of this fissure? It's the wiring of your brain. And in fact, this red bundle here at the bottom of that fissure is the single largest fiber bundle that is the wiring that connects the right and left sides of your brain. It's called the corpus callosum. And we think that this might be one of the most common mechanisms of concussion. And that as the forces move down, they strike the corpus callosum, it causes a dissociation between your right and your left brain. It could explain some of the symptoms of concussion. This finding is also consistent of what we've seen in this brain disease that I mentioned, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So this is an image of a middle-aged ex-professional football player. And the thing that I want to point out is if you look at the corpus callosum, and I'll page back here so you can see the size of normal corpus callosum and the size of the person here who has chronic traumatic encephalopathy, it is greatly atrophied. And the same goes for all of the space in the ventricles. These ventricles are much larger. And so all of this tissue near the center of the brain has died off over time. So what we're learning is indeed consistent. Now,
Alright, the rest of it is just him advertising a product
Okay.
to help. So
All right.
that's our presentation.
Okay.